Chapter 9, October 1917. Autumn had arrived. Each day, sunup was later and sundown earlier. Temperatures during the day were cooler and during the evening below freezing. The color of leaves on maple, chokecherry, and cottonwood trees had changed from green to yellow. The wind brought biting cold air to dispatch the leaves from trees and rustle those already on the ground. Ranchers were busy trying to complete harvest activities. Townsfolk were wearing longer, warmer coats as they bustled about. So many fallen, thought Dr. Harvey as he drove his Hudson onto River Valley Road, west of town during the late afternoon. He was looking at the multitude of fallen leaves under the cottonwood and box elder trees between the Yellowstone River bank and River Valley Road, but thinking of reports from Europe, of the hundreds of thousands of dead soldiers and civilians in what some were calling the Great War. That morning at his office he had seen a woman who told him she felt too weak to care for herself, yet she knew she had to care for her children and her ill-aging mother. The weakness, the lack of sleep, loss of appetite, and absence of energy she described were surely caused by her despondency, her utter grief. The grief had become after she had opened the door of her home to see a soldier in dress uniform, ribbons neatly lined over his heart on his coat, and shoes perfectly polished. His deep, caring voice said he regretted to inform her that her son had died during a training exercise. She knew he said more about a grateful nation, but she could not remember exactly what, nor could she remember how she became seated on the rocking chair in her living room. During the week since she received this news, she had eaten little, slept less, and showed no interest in her own cleanliness or maintenance of her home. Her sister had brought her to his office. According to the very concerned sister, the husband was as grief-stricken as his wife. Dr. Harvey wrote a prescription for a tincture of opium. Taking this potion each evening might help the grieving mother sleep. He told the sister there was no medication to treat the underlying cause of the problem. Only time and understanding of those close to her could begin to mend her badly broken heart. Still, he had thought to himself that some patients would have intractable pathologic grief and require institutional care. He knew this woman would not be the only grieving parent he would see during the coming weeks. He found himself thinking more and more of the limitations of medicine, his inability to cure many of the maladies appearing in his office day after day. A young boy with diabetes was an example. He was always thirsty, always urinating, and his mother was doing her best to grapple with the recommended diet. This boy would likely die before becoming an adult, and contemporary medicine had little to offer to alter that fate. A young man with Rocky Mountain spotted fever was another example. He had told of a fever and skin rash and recalled a tick bite to support the diagnosis. But whether he recovered or declined would be little affected by any treatment now available. Still another example was an older woman with joints so swollen and deformed that she had trouble holding a cup of tea, let alone helping care for her grandchildren, as she wanted to do most of all. So many illnesses he wanted to treat, but for which no effective treatment was available. These thoughts always accumulated with an image of his wife entering the last trimester of pregnancy, and so optimistic about being a parent. Within a week her ankles swelled, her kidneys failed, her blood pressure soared, and she and the baby were gone. Why could he not have done more? The question, still unanswered, stuck in his mind. However, there were diseases, notably injuries, for which his training had prepared him to provide effective treatment. This afternoon he was going to visit Amanda, who had delivered a baby girl in late August. She was now living with the baby and her two sons in a two-room dwelling at Finch Junction. Living there allowed both Axel and Raymond to attend Howard School, where classes for grades 1 through high school were provided. He expected Raymond would have returned from school this late in the afternoon. He wanted to examine the young boy's right leg, now 6 months after his fracture had been realigned and stabilized. Finch Junction was about halfway between Forsyth and Hysham on the Northern Pacific Railroad line. The unincorporated town had been named for a Northern Pacific executive, a superintendent of dining cars. Like other section stops, every 7 to 10 miles along the railroad line, it was a home to a depot and a section crew. Since 1914, it was also home to a post office. The one-story wood-frame building in which Amanda and her children had lived since school began was near the depot. As he approached, he saw Raymond and another young boy playing with a ball in front of the building. He parked his automobile and asked, "Hello, Raymond. Is your mother home?" He replied, "Yes, she is inside. I'll tell her you are here." Raymond entered the building and a moment later reappeared with his mother at his side. She was holding gently in her arms a small bundle wrapped in a pink blanket. She looked very tired despite her smile and ramrod straight posture. "Welcome, Doctor," she said. "Won't you come in and have some tea?" He stepped over the doorsill and entered the room with a sink, icebox, wood stove, table, 3 wooden chairs, a bed, and a crib. He saw another bed in a small adjoining room. From the ceiling hung an electric cord and a light bulb. He looked at Amanda. "This must be your new baby," he said. "May I see her?" "Yes, this is Helen. Would you like to hold her while I heat water for tea?" she replied. He took the bundle and looked at the entirely innocent face of the sleeping baby. "She is beautiful," he said. He asked, "How are you doing? It must not be easy to care for an infant and your 2 boys by yourself in temporary living space away from your homestead." She did not reply at first while she prepared cups, saucers, spoons, and sugar to serve with the tea. Then she said, "As long as my boys are well and my baby healthy, I will be fine. My husband, Charles, comes some days, but needs to be at the homestead most of the time to care for our animals, mend fences, and prepare the house and barn for winter. When he comes, he brings milk and eggs. Yesterday he brought some squash, the last thing in our garden this year. On the next trip, he will bring more wood for the stove." He found her response informative, but tangential to his question. "You have very fortunate children and a caring husband," he said. "How are you doing? You look tired, as most mothers with an infant do. Do you have a friend, another woman with whom to talk and share ideas?" She replied with a firm, determined voice, "Doctor, you are very kind to be so concerned. I am fine. Helen is my 3rd baby, and I know I will be very tired for many months while I care for an infant. I moved here for Axel and Raymond to be closer to school. My children are blessings to me. There is nothing I would rather do than care for them." She paused and continued, "I do not talk with other women here. I see the woman next door nearly every day. On Thursdays, some women from town bring bread and pies to sell to section crew workers. We visit when they come, and Johanna still visits me every other week. I am seeing other women more often here than I would on the homestead. I feel good about that. I am happy to learn of your friendships. If there is anything with which I might help, please tell me," he said. "I would like to examine Raymond again while I am here. He appears to be getting along well." "Of course, I will call him into the house," she replied. The baby had begun crying. Amanda changed the diaper and was breastfeeding the now quiet infant while Dr. Harvey examined Raymond's leg. It had healed remarkably well. He looked at the wear patterns on the heels of Raymond's shoes. There was no evidence for a disparity in leg length between the right and left. He questioned the boy and the mother about Raymond's activities. His strength and balance seemed unencumbered. The status of this busy, growing boy was good. Before leaving, he thanked her for the tea and told her Raymond's leg had healed and his leg bone was supporting an active, growing youngster. During the drive back to town, he reflected on his visit and about some egregious health problems persisting in the country. One physician had told him of a homesteader family found dead in their cabin in 1914. 3 children, ages 3 to 7, and their mother were found by the father, who had been working in Roundup for 2 weeks. The cause of death for the children was diphtheria. For the mother, a self-inflicted gunshot. Even if these children had been brought to a physician, timely delivery of diphtheria antitoxin and around-the-clock monitoring of severely ill children would not have been easily accomplished in a town with no hospital. A rancher had told him of another family demise that occurred in 1915. The rancher had been asked to take a team of horses and a wagon to town to get a casket and return the casket to a neighbor's homestead. By the time he delivered the casket, it was 11 p.m., and by the time the body was buried, 11:30 a.m. The deceased was a child with whooping cough. A physician from town had also come to the homestead. The next day, the rancher was asked to pick up and deliver another casket to the same homestead. Another child had died, also with whooping cough. The second casket had been too large for the grave dug for the child by the neighbors. The rancher helped enlarge the grave so the body and casket could be buried. He had asked if there were any other ill children in the family. There were 2. The next day, he delivered another casket for another burial. Dr. Harvey wondered if vaccines could be developed to prevent deaths from infectious diseases such as diphtheria and whooping cough. If accomplished, this would certainly be a cause for celebration. He also thought about some marvels to be celebrated already: electricity, powered pumps for delivering water to homes, and lights for illuminating the homes. Telephones made it possible to talk with people whether they were near or far away. Radio, whether electric or battery operated, like the one at the Swenson home, made it possible for ranchers and homesteaders to hear the Metropolitan Opera, as well as reports of fighting in Europe. And the railroads and the U.S. mail allowed persons in Rosebud County to purchase items from Chicago almost as readily as from Forsyth. The morning at Dr. Harvey's office, May had asked if he had began preparing for Christmas yet. She had. The topic seemed premature to him, but as she described some of her preparation, he began to think maybe he too should be taking steps to be ready. She had a list of people to whom she wanted to give a gift, for some more than one gift. When she began listing the gifts, she had concluded that some items were not available at stores or shops in Forsyth. Some might be available in Billings or Miles City if she journeyed there. But that morning she was studying a Sears Roebuck catalog. When she would need to place orders to allow gift items to be delivered to Forsyth in time for her to wrap them, May's planning stimulated him to think about the upcoming holidays. He resolved to send greetings and gifts to his brother and to Marie's parents. He was nearing Forsyth now, crossing the railroad tracks on the western edge of town. The railroad was essential for much of the American life. Not only was mail transported by railroads, but so were people, crops, and cattle. He realized, though, the role of railroads could change, as the role had been played by steamboats and horse-drawn wagons once railroads arrived. Already, townspeople and ranchers were using automobiles to travel to places they had previously visited by rail, and ranchers were beginning to move crops and cattle to market in trucks, with internal combustion engines rather than railroad cars pulled by steam-powered engines. The presence of the railroad in Forsyth was the essential reason he was now practicing medicine here. He wondered if he would continue to practice in this rural setting. When he arrived in town, he parked his Hudson and walked to his room in the annex of the Alexander Hotel. After a devastating fire had destroyed several buildings on the Chaucier block in June, new brick buildings, including a new 3-story structure behind the Alexander Hotel, had been completed. Dr. Harvey had moved into a new apartment in the annex. The apartment had electricity, telephone, running water, and a bathroom. He considered his living arrangement now to be thoroughly modern. He was hungry and prepared a sandwich with bread May had given him the day before and cheese from the icebox. He sliced an apple into quarter sections and sat at the table near his bed. He was more tired than he had anticipated after the drive to Finch Junction. He jokes with himself. Maybe he had been thinking too much, about too many things, contemplating insoluble problems as well as the wonders of modern life unimaginable a generation or two ago was enough to tire anyone. After using the bathroom, he sat on the bed, intending to read the latest issue of the Journal of American Medical Association. However, it was Marie and not the medical articles dominating his thoughts. He recalled one of his mother's frequent sayings. "Sometimes it is harder than you think to not think of something," she would say. He continued to look at the journal and to sip Flying U rye from a glass.